Thank you. I wish to thank Amy for coming to Werribee. And if you look at, I think it's YouTube or whatever, there's a little girl called Victoria Grant. She's only a 12-year-old Canadian girl. So between the 12-year-old Canadian girl and the 91-year-old women, isn't that an indictment on all you men? And I don't say that with what you call dispassion, because this is beyond apathy. It's a deadness. Now, in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to categorically prove to you that your last 3 Commonwealth elections were held outside the Constitution. So when you're talking about a coming referendum, you're talking about digging your own hole. If you permit this next election to happen, you have dug your own hole. Now, I'm not going to refrain from that, because in the next 10 minutes, I'll categorically prove why I charged 54 people for doing what they're doing. Now, most of the stuff that I'm going to put up here is available on our website. There's a website which you can find on this DVD outside that door, and I've got to give it a credence to, on one side there's the United Nations trap, which I did a few years ago in Kalgoorlie, long before I'd heard about Amy or her work. But on the other side there's a CD from a man called Larry Hannigan in Queensland. Now, it was with Larry's help that I was able to edit the United Nations trap, because if you don't edit these things, they go into we are the never never, and they don't get to the point. But the point is, why did I charge Julia Gillard? Now, a lot of people say I pronounce her name incorrectly. I really don't give a hoot. We're talking about a red-headed lady who came into Werribee, and thank God for Amy, she calls her a socialist communist.
Yep.
I'm pretty happy with that title, because she's not sitting legally. Now, if you knew your constitutions, and that's this one, there's your Commonwealth Constitution. Have all of you got it sitting on your desk? Say and be honest, because you're asking why there's a problem, but you don't know what the problem is, because you haven't read your law. Is that a fair comment?
Yep.
There's your Constitution of Victoria. I assume you've all got that sitting on your desk. You're here to find a problem. Is that correct? Yes. But you haven't got your law sitting on your desk. And yet the politicians, let us get this to the end. The politicians are about to trick you. Now, I'm in every court in the country. If you go into our website, you'll see which court I'm in. Now, fortunately, I'm a pensioner, and fortunately, I don't have any assets. And that's the only way you can come into court. Because the moment that you do have an asset, they hit you with a cost order. And they won't go any further till they've got that cost order. Now, in Victoria, the average person says, oh, we better get a lawyer because we've got this problem. Well, in the 5th of September 2000, your state parliament, while you were all asleep, didn't read your constitution that you didn't have on your desk, took the oath of allegiance out of the Legal Practice Act. Now, if you don't know what that means, I'll tell you what that means. A Supreme Court judge in West Australia, he said to me, because I've got a number of judges charged, including West Australia and Victoria, and High Court. I'm about as welcome as a pork chop at a Jewish barbecue anymore. And please forgive me for the eulogy. But when this Supreme Court judge said to me, but Mr. Shaw, what is the offence of treason? I said, I beg your pardon, I'm a farmer from Werribee. You're the judge. And he said, well, it's not the usual offence that comes across the desk. And I said to him, R versus Casement, now when the judge asks you that, you better know what you're going to quote. R versus Casement, King's Bench, 1917, says treason is breach of allegiance. Now, when you took the oath of allegiance out of the Legal Practice Act in Victoria on the 5th of September 2000, did your lawyers and politicians commit an act of treason? Yes. You're the elector, and you're about to go into a voting row. Am I getting my point across?
Yes.
You're digging your own hole, and they expect you to dig it, and they expect you to cover it in. Are you that stupid?
Well, we are at the moment.
Are you that stupid, Aussies?
No, we want to wake
Wake
up.
up. Because, as I said to the judiciary in Sunshine the other day, I'm in that many courts I forget which paperwork to get. And that's not Jerry knows. I said to the judiciary, it's out of your hands. Because it's in the hands of the people in Werribee. Why? Because Julia Gillard was charged with treason. Now, in this document here, I'm holding my right hand because I went tent in bowling with my granddaughter thing, and you forget how old you are, and the arms not working. But it says here, Julia Gillard knew that West Australia and Victoria put an act into position that removed the oath of allegiance. Now, how can you run a constitution, this one, if your oath of allegiance is removed? The only way you can remove it is with referendum consent. And up till now, I never really linked Agenda 21, because Jerry used to talk to me often about it, the problems they have in Gippsland with Agenda 21, but he never enunciated it correctly. He's getting much better at it now, and even sometimes when he was usually flamboyant, and he was that in the county court one day, when him and his buddy found himself evicted from the court and sitting on their butts in Lonsdale Street. And he's learned a lot after that, but that's not how you attend to law. How you attend to law, now people think I go into courts to try to get an adjudication. I don't do that at all. I go into courtrooms to trap the court in the offence. Got it? To show categorically that your judicial system is already Agenda 21. Is that adorning? You will not get any common sense at all out of judiciaries, whether it be VCAT, whether it be Magistrates Court, whether it be County Court, whether it be Supreme Court, or whether it be the High Court. Because on the 1st of January 2004 in Western Australia, now I had a pastor the other day, God bless his heart, saying the people have a problem because they think it's just a West Australian problem. They can't understand the Victorian issue. I want to tell you a fact of life. If you're a state elector, you're a Commonwealth elector. That's a fact of life. Now, if there's a problem in West Australia, is there a problem in the Commonwealth?
Yes.
You're the elector, you're also a jury. Now, what is the catalyst that they're running this on? The Masonic Lodge. Now, I'm saying this quite categorically because it's not a Fabian Society exclusive issue of the Labor Party, and thank God for Amy, because one of the things I learned in Amy's book is the Fabian Society created the Labor Party. Is that adorning?
Yep.
Is that a reality? But then you think, oh, the Liberals will clean it up. No, this is bipartisan. The Greens will tidy it up. No. Now, I nominated in a couple of elections here in Werribee not to be a politician. For God's sake, I don't want to be a politician. But I nominated to learn the mechanics of the election. That's why, because when you nominate, you're privy to the forms, you're privy to the process, you know the deal. Now, if I was to ask you, please don't answer those who know, who issues the writ for the Senators of Victoria? Can anybody put their hand up and give the answer? Because you're going to be asked to vote shortly. They've even set a date, September 24th. I will tell you categorically that if you do not stop that election, you will never see your rights ever again.
Stop the election?
I'm going to categorically prove that the election cannot be held legally right now. Because, but I want to speak specifically about this document here. I'm holding it up so the camera can zero in on it. When they tried to slam dunk us, and they're doing that, they forgot in Victoria we're the only jurisdiction in the whole UK structure that still had grand jury on its books. Now, what's grand jury? Grand jury is where a court has declined or refused to hold the offender to bail. At that point, if you are the person who's laid the charge, which in normal law, that's finished then, you can then take it to the next step of walking it across the road to the full court of the Supreme Court of Victoria and file it for a grand jury. That's section 354 of your Victorian Crimes Act. That's actually what I did. And in fact, saying to your Chief Magistrate at the time, and then I'm talking the 15th of December 2006, when I had 28 defendants at the Melbourne Magistrates Court, one of which was John Howard, another was the Governor-General Michael Jeffries. So I had some big players. I criminally charged them for being, as my grandson says, robbers. He's got the correct word, because he's used to watching Home Alone. They're robbers. Now, when you look it up in the Hebrew Concordance, it actually means God is saying, you're robbing me of my children. People need to understand that word, because here, people are saying this is the United Nations plot. But I'm going to name it from this pulpit. There's a structure here in Werribee called Wyndham Ministers Network. 28 ministers get together once a month. And for as long back as 2005, they've concealed this from all of you. Is that a fair comment? Now, how do I know they concealed it? I subpoenaed 6 of them to be in the Melbourne Magistrates Court on the 15th of December 2006. They all got in their car to come back to Werribee because they don't see it's a problem for the church or for the people. But I said, almost all of the people sitting in front of you on Sunday are all electors. Is that fair? And what you're doing to Werribee is concealing criminal activity. If people are stealing, they are committing criminal activity. Now, the boss of the Melbourne Magistrates Court, he called me in one day to his little inner sanctum office, and he said this to me, as the business was filling out some more charges. He said, you're charging some pretty important people in this country. I said, no, I'm not. I'm charging criminals involved in criminal activity.
Yep. Yeah.
Now, unless you understand that right, you're going to get tricked to the next election. Now, on the 1st of January 2004, West Australia put through an act called Acts Amendment Repeal Courts and Legal Practice Act. All these documents that I have here are available on that website that you'll find on that. And if you haven't got it, pick it up at the bench on the way out. But equally acknowledge Larry's input to the CD. The CD is written in the first person of the flag, which everyone's trotting on now. Going back to this document before I move into the other. This document, it comes from the Masonic Lodge. It's a Masonic Lodge document. But at the top, it actually says that to be a 32nd degree Scottish Rite, or a Knights Templar in the York Rite, you have to be that to be a Shriner. Which in actual fact means the Shriners then outrank those two ranks. I'm a farmer, but to me that's pretty logical. If you've got the graph, every Mason is not allowed to see this. But here comes my point. Who is the oath of allegiance to in the Shriners? It's to Allah. That means every Freemason in Australia, without their knowledge, is sitting under a Muslim structure.
Oh, God.
Now, I'm quite happy to take that into the court. You are the court. Do you understand that? You are the court because you are the people, because you are the elector. If you want to get on a jury, you've got to be on the electoral roll. If you want to be on a grand jury, you've got to be on the electoral roll. But what the Supreme Court is doing is not allowing it. Why? Because I can categorically tell you that your Supreme Court, your Magistrates Court, your County Court and VCAT in this Victoria are all Masonic lodges. Every one of them. Their job is to make sure that you don't break through in law. Now, when they took the Crown out of West Australia with that Acts, Amendment, Repeal, Courts and Legal Practice Act on the 1st of January 2004, did it require a referendum?
Yes.
Did it require a referendum under the West Australian Constitution? But if you go back to the Australia Act in 1986, because you look at when, well, how far back does this fraud go? If you go back to the Australia Act, who was the architect of the Australia Act? Now, fortunately, Amy mentions Bob Hawke in her book, The Fabian Society, and mentions 5 Prime Ministers who were Fabian Socialists. But it's bipartisan. Now I'll read a section from a book I found in the Parliament of the Commonwealth of Australia. It's the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs, July 1997. And it says aspects of Section 44. They were at the time trying to get Section 44 out of your Constitution. Why? Because it's the disqualification section. And they didn't want it in there. But the problem is they couldn't get it out. And here's what it says at the beginning of it. And portion of the foreword. As the collection of evidence drew to a close, it became evident that there was but limited scope for addressing the problems by means of legislative and or executive action. That's pretty fancy stuff. What did they leave out? They left out they left out judicial action. And that's why the High Court ruled that Senator Hill, with a British passport, was serving a foreign power in the Constitution. Can you believe that? And it's a British Act. And it was meant to destroy Section 44. And because you Aussies, and I don't refrain from it, you don't have these documents on your table. And you're all busy being busy. I rang one guy in Geelong and said, you've got to get to that thing. He said, I'm pretty busy. I said, well, while you're busy, you lost your house in the 6th of November 1999. You lost everything on the 6th of November 1999. Are you aware of that? Because on the 6th of November 1999, now my son, there's one of my sons sitting up the back, at that time we had started a courtroom action on a lease farm on the bank of the Werribee River, myself and 2 sons, against a family here. Won't go into the background. But that's what brought us into the Supreme Court. So we filed the writ on September 1999. Unbeknownst to us at the time, we didn't know that the United Nations had done an edict that all governments of the world, and they put the edict out in September 1999, were to be dissolved and to come under the UN. So when we filed the writ, We didn't even know the Supreme Court had already assigned itself into that. You've lost your rights, you've lost your law, you lost the law. Now, on the 6th of November, they asked you to vote in a Commonwealth referendum. Is that correct? Remember the date? 6th of November 1999. They said, do you want a republic or do you want to keep the monarch? The Aussie voted under a referendum, keep the monarch. Why? Because we know that one, don't know the other one. That's all. On the same day, all of your constitutions were suspended. Is that a reality to you? Now, don't think that that's not whatever. I've said it in the Supreme Court. The documents in the High Court say exactly that. And nobody is objecting or refuting or challenging it. Why? Now, I've become, detrimentally, a vexatious litigant in the state of Victoria and in the state of Western Australia. Now, what's a vexatious litigant? That's a person who's filing documents without a reasonable cause of action. Is criminal activity against the Aussies a reasonable cause of action?
Yes.
The reason why I'm saying that, when you see me on TV or whatever and being degraded in the media or whatever, understand what the issue is. Did those journos or whatever reveal to you that the Crown was removed without the referendum?
No.
Now, here comes the problem. When they're telling you to vote in the next Commonwealth election, is it under the Crown?
No.
No, no. The answer is yes, but they didn't tell you it's gone. Because if it's there, then they can hold the Commonwealth election. But if you knew that it's already gone, have you dug your own hole and then covered it in? Yes, you have, Aussie. As I said to the courtroom, now, we got literally truckloads of evidence, and I mean truckloads of evidence, because the first thing the other side says is, they do it for the transcript, Mr Shaw's produced no evidence. And then, in one court, in Western Australia, I stood up then, and I said, could you please note for the purpose of the transcript, the evidence that I haven't produced is at least a foot high on the bar table. Now, that was the purpose of the transcript, because they're actually saying, I produced no evidence. Now, in this document on section 44, there's an interesting little thing, and please bear with me till I find the correct page. But I think I can get there real quick. Now, remembering this fact, this is a parliamentary paper, which means I don't have to prove it. I've only got to state what's in it. This is what it says at page 18. Professor Blackshield, that's a professor of law from Queensland, supported the view that the words entitled to the rights or privileges, and when I'm reading that, before I read it, I'll read the section that it's coming from in section 44, which you would all know, wouldn't you? No problem. Because if you don't, you're about to be slam dunked. Section 44 of the document you don't have, is that a fair comment? Yeah. Most of you can get on a web and get this document. For nothing. For nothing. Section 44 says, any person who, now this is the issue here in this that I'm about to read, there's 5 subsections in here. Now the section I have charged Julia Gillard under is what you call common law treason, misprision of treason. Now what is misprision of treason? It's not a charge of treason, it's misprision of treason, which means she knew West Australia took the Crown out and she concealed it. That is misprision of treason, the concealment of treason. That's what she's charged for. And it must be by grand jury, not the judiciary. What the Supreme Court in every state, inclusive of the High Court, is blocking is you getting it to grand jury. Can you get this to grand jury in Werribee? Yes. There's your challenge. Because if you go, we'll deal with the house later. But if you walk out that door and go back to sleep, you dug a real big hole and you'll be holding a shovel covering it in. We've all seen it on the movie, where they take the person to the hole and say, dig your own hole and shoot them dead and get their mate to fill it in. That's what you're doing. And it's actually done. But it says here, any person who is under any acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience or adherence to a foreign power. Now, when I first laid my first criminal charge, it was on Charlie Wheeler, Supreme Court Master in the Supreme Court of Victoria. Not a bad opponent. So I said to him in the court, I said, we've got two oaths here. One is the courtroom oath, the judicial oath. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. To which he said, that's correct. But I said, you're the highest ranked Freemason in the country. And your oath would say, I swear to conceal and never reveal. Which is the oath now? I said, we've got two. You have the right to remain silent. But they're going to take a walk across the road and charge you for that. Went to the Melbourne Magistrates Court. Filled out the thing at the top. And the registrar took one look at it and said, I'm not signing that off. And I said, why? I said, look who that is. I said, that's fair. Cross it out and write your name. I said, what the hell are you doing? And I said, well, you just concealed an indictable offence and might as well make you number one. You're in. You got it. Fill it out. And he goes, leave it with me. And 3 days later, I came back, signed, sealed and delivered. Walked it back over the road to Charlie's court, and Sally, his associate, was out on the front before it was 9:45, he's due out at 10. And I handed her the piece of paper. She went off the tree. She said, he's not going to be happy with this. I said, you heard the challenge. Now the challenge is this. We charged the Grand Master of Freemasonry in Western Australia, and he went to the Magistrates Court on that charge. The taking and administering of an unlawful oath in Victoria and Western Australia is a criminal offence chargeable for 5 years. Pretty simple. If the Masonic Lodge has an Act of Parliament to take the oath they're taking, fair. If they don't, that's an unlawful oath. And we got it on video. The Supreme Court refuses to run it. If you want to see it, we'll have another session. But in the interim, I said, why are you protecting Freemasonry if it's got nothing to hide? Now the issue is, when we got into a Masonic lodge in Perth, that was by invitation, the ritual was open at night, I'm sitting next to the Grand Master, when it would become questions and answer, we'd already got the Grand Master placed on bail in Perth. Not too bad for a couple of farmers. Don't know the way around the courtroom, but we know our way around a bit of crime. And I said, I put up my hand, and I said, I have to admit to you that your Grand Master was placed on bail for taking Masonic oaths in West Australia. And he could have heard a pin drop, because they all had their wives there as a public evening and ritual night. They're all dressed to the nines, and suddenly I'm in there. And then one Mason said, but why would you do such a thing? And I said, it's as simple as this. One law running north-south, the other running east-west, and we've met at the intersection and the lights come on. If you've got nothing to fear or nothing to hide, you won't mind the intersection. But if you have got something to fear and something to hide, it's going to be high impact. And then before the Grand Master or the Master shut the lodge, he's got to bang the stick twice to shut it. He was sitting 3 feet from me. He looked like, you know, the quarterback of a rugby team type thing. Little ponytail, Scottish, and he can clean you up real easy. And he just said this. He said, before I shut this lodge, we've had a lively meeting tonight. Yeah, it was real lively. I was surrounded by 600 of the suckers. But he said, I'm going to speak for myself and every Freemason in this lodge, which is the law of Freemasonry. The Grand Master is the boss. That's what the Republic's going to do, the boss. He said, anything wrong with Freemasonry and we're all leaving. Now what he said was, now go and prove your case. Now when I was in West Australia in front of 3 Supreme Court judges who really think they're the pinnacle of the laws of the state, and the opponent was the Commonwealth Attorney, the Commonwealth Public Prosecutor, Damien Buck. Now who's Damien Buck? He was your Director of Public Prosecutions Commonwealth. Prior to that, he was your Tasmanian DPP at the Port Arthur massacre. Did he cover anything in Tasmania?
Oh,
Did he get
yeah.
elevated from Tasmania to the Commonwealth because of what he covered?
28 head
Tasmania?
gunshots.
I only put that before you as a grand jury. There are people who need to be indicted from grand jury work here so that this can go to trial before you ever go to an election. And it should be a trial next week in Werribee. Now, who is concealing this in Werribee? Every one of your councillors in Werribee were put on notice in 2010. At least a dozen of your preachers, including the one from Catch the Fire across the country, Danny Nowen, who's concealing this. I'm coming into the area now that's pretty important. So that in that area there of section 44 subsection 1, this is what Professor Blackshield said in relation to Bob Hawke. Now Bob Hawke was the architect, or he gave the Fabian Society speech in 1984, their inaugural centenary speech. You can get a copy of that on our website. Julia Gillard did the Fabian Society speech to the same mob in 2007. You can get a copy of that. So what Amy is saying is proved conclusively in their speeches. Fabian socialism is absolute communism. And if that's what you want, that's what you're going to get. But have you had the correct information? Now in this book it says this, sorry, and Bob Hawke and Keating were also the two architects of the sale of your Commonwealth Bank in 1991. It says this, Professor Blackshield supported the view that the words entitled to the rights or privileges raised particular problems. As noted above during the 1980s, the then Prime Minister, Mr Hawke, was threatened with a challenge under section 44 subsection 1. I read a portion of that. Because he had been made an honorary citizen of Israel. Should I reread it? It's a Senate standing paper. I don't have to prove it. It's already listed as a parliamentary document. The issue is, was your Prime Minister at the time sitting disqualified under section 44? Yes. You're the elector, you're the jury. If you let this go to anybody else, excuse the expression, pick up the shovel and dig your own hole. Because you're doing that by your apathy. And I don't refrain from the word, but in section 73 of the West Australian Constitution, it states this. If you touch sections, there's 6 sections in the West Australian Constitution that are protected by a state referendum. This is a magnificent constitution. It says this. If you touch section 2, 3, 4, 50, 51 and 73, at G, 73 2G, it says the bill is also prior to such presentation being approved by the electors in accordance with this section. Now under this little book, which is the Constitution, you can get these for $15. Get them quickly because they're taking them out of your bookshops and you can only get them on the downloads on the webs now, but this is a good book because it's got the Australia Act in it. Now the Australia Act says this, that portion of it. At section 14 of the Australia Act, which is the one that permits them to do what you call the royal assent to the acts once they're finished. So once they got the Australia Act into position, it was an open pen. This is like giving your fraudulent bank manager access to your bank account. There won't be much left by the time you go there. Section 14 of the Australia Act says Amendment of Constitution Act of West Australia. It amends Section 50 and Section 51. The problem with those two sections is it's in the West Australian Constitution at 2, 3, 4, 50, 51 and 73. You You touched 50 or 51, you had to go to the electors of West Australia. Did it?
No.
And listen to the next section. It then says, and the bill is sent to consequent upon its presentation in contravention of this subsection shall be of no effect as an act. Now that actually meant that the Australia Act, on that portion on its own, is a dead document. But with bipartisan consent through the Masonic Lodge, they've agreed, all of them have agreed, to trick you in your elections. To trick you. And that is why I laid the criminal charges. I laid them so that you could hear them in a public forum. Now, how does grand jury work? Grand jury is 23 people chosen from the electoral roll to hear if the court should have dealt with an offence but didn't deal with it. But the 23 people from the electoral roll hear it. Excuse me, folks. Do I have an indictment? I don't need all of you, I only need 23 of you. And if that 23, if the 12 out of the 23 say that's an indictable offence, I've got my indictment. But why is the indictment important? Because at section 80 of the Commonwealth Constitution, it states this. At section 80 of the Commonwealth Constitution, now this is why the trial can be held in Werribee. The trial and indictment of any offence against any law of the Commonwealth shall be by jury. Now the operative word in that is indictment. The only place you can get an indictment is by your State Director of Public Prosecutions, if it's a state offence, Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions, if it's a Commonwealth offence, or a grand jury. Now when they decided to trick you, they forgot that we had grand jury on our books.
Yeah.
And by the grace of God, I found it. That's what I've been using. Now, when the Chief Magistrate on the 15th of December 2006, 6 pastors sitting up the back row from Werribee, said, Mr Shaw, the public prosecutions have taken over, you're non-suited now, which in actual fact means it's finished. And I had 3 files on the desk of every one of those defendants, and I just said to the Chief Magistrate Ian Gray, who had just said, because I said I'm relying on the Constitution to place these charges, this is what he said: you will not be relying on the Constitution in my court. That is your Chief Magistrate, as of recently was still sitting, but it's got pretty hot, so I think they've either made him a coroner or sent him down to the county court. But I said, well, what do I do with these files? Now, I knew exactly what I was going to do with them, but he didn't. They said, well, what are they? And I said, they're all the grand jury applications. When they declined to present, they just declined at that end of the table. Now, in your Public Prosecutions Act 1994, which you've all got a copy of, I assume, you can't present someone to trial unless it's in the name of the Queen. But in section 51, subsection 3, the office of the Public Prosecutor of Victoria is removed from the Queen. So, hello, how are you presenting? Unless you're presenting in a vacuum, waiting for the Republic to happen. And then when it does, and all you have to do is go to the polling booth, and you've already got it, because you got it on the 6th of November 1999, when all your constitutions were suspended because of what they had to do. But here in this section, it says this. In the Acts, Amendment and Repeal Courts and Legal Practice Act 2003, at section 130, the Supreme Court Act 1935 is amended. Now, when I was in the Supreme Court in West Australia in front of 3 judges, 2 guys and a woman, they gave me first up. I said, I'll categorically prove in 10 minutes that you're the offender, Your Honour. And that's all I had to read. That the Supreme Court had permitted their act to be amended. But listen to how they amended it. Supreme Court Act amended Section 3. Section 9(1) is amended by deleting Her Majesty and inserting instead the Governor. Did you understand the amendment?
Yep.
What that means is, when you farmers left your kitchen, got out on your tractor and you've gone for 2 days farming every other paddock in the country, and you suddenly get back into your kitchen, then the whole family moved in. What the hell are you doing here? Well, the house was vacant when we got here, so we took over.
Yep.
Are they allowed to stay? Well, why are you letting this switch happen? Because if the Governor of West Australia threw Her Majesty out, now here comes your problem. Who issues the writ for the senators of the state? The Governor issues the writ. So in West Australia, the Governor of West Australia, who is now the monarch, or did I read it wrong, or should I reread it? Then issues the writ for the senators of West Australia, who then jump on a plane and go and sit with all the senators in Canberra. Is your Senate valid?
No.
But they're asking you to vote. Or did I get it wrong?
You can't
Hey,
vote.
Aussie, did I get it wrong?
We can't vote.
Because if you don't walk out that door tonight, realising that you've got that shovel and you're digging your own hole, you better make absolutely sure what's about to happen in the next couple of weeks. Because that September date will be a furphy. It only takes Julia Gillard, even if I pronounce the name incorrectly, we're talking about the red-headed lady down at Synod Street. It only takes Julia Gillard and Quentin Bryce. Those are the only two who have to prorogue your parliament. But then when I say that to people, they say, what's that mean? Well, what does that mean? It actually means that when your parliament is stopped, it sits sine die. And from the proroguing, you only have 42 days to the election. They could do that next week. Are you ready to stop it? No, you're not. Because how did, as some of the farmers in Rockbank said, how did this move from a rates problem to an Agenda 21 to a criminal charge? I'll tell you what we've uncovered. Every one of you people sitting there, since 72 hours of your live birth, and clearly you had a live birth, that's why you're sitting there. Is that fair comment?
Yeah.
The government traded you onto the stock exchange.
Yeah.
Now you can download all that stuff, just download birth certificate trading. And then go and find someone who can find your QSIT number. Now your QSIT number is exactly the same as the registration on your motor car. It will identify your car, it will identify you. What do you think you are worth on the trade since you've been 2-3 days old? I can tell you now, and please put the greed aside, it's an astronomical figure. But does the government know they're trading you? Of course they do, because it's done through every Treasury corporation in Victoria and all the states. And it's lodged over in the United States, where all of your land titles under Brigalow Corporation, you can Google that one too, have all been transferred into the United States. Why? Because that's where your 4 banks all belong. Now you can't do what you're about to do to the Aussie unless you've got the banks involved in it and the Masonic Lodge, because you've got to do it under concealment. You've got to do it under I swear to conceal and never reveal. But the problem is, do we need them to reveal, what are you doing here? Of course we do. Because, as I said to Mr. Charlie Wheeler on that day, I said, if you serve a foreign power that could destroy our structure, our culture, our society, do we need to uncover you? Can we leave you as a man who sat on a judicial bench for 30 years with all the legal training you have? We can't match it. But do we leave you sitting there as a Freemason, transferring every one of us and our kids and our land into a foreign power?
No.
Is that fair?
No.
All I was saying to them was, Make it a trial of the issue. The defendants won't go to jail, because as I said to Charlie on that day, I'll make an agreement with you. If I'm responsible for getting you in jail, I'll come and help you get out. But if you're responsible for getting me in jail, I hope it's reciprocal. But we left it at that. But the thing is, this encounter between Charlie and I, because he sits, he's retired now, as Supreme Court Master, but he sits on the Supreme Council of Freemasonry in Australia, which means he's the highest ranked sucker in the country. And that's the first one I charged. And at the time I didn't know he was. But who is doing this to our country? Now it's as simple as this. If the Masonic oath is a lawful oath, let them go about their business. But if the Masonic oath is an unlawful oath, that's 6 years jail. And I'll guarantee, with a 10-minute video I've got that you can find on our website, probably don't go there tonight, we'll probably have to put it in there. But within 10 minutes, in front of a grand jury, I'll have an indictment walking out the door, which means we can go to trial in Werribee. Now, I know categorically people say, but you're going to waste your time in the courtrooms. And in that way, I would disagree. But the problem, as I said to the judges, but they say, if you're challenging the jurisdiction of the court, what are you doing in here? Now, my answer is this. I'm not challenging the jurisdiction of the court because this court belongs to us, the people, and Her Majesty. That's the agreement. But I am challenging your fraudulent conduct inside this jurisdiction. That's different. That means that you're a trustee of a fund and you've been tickling the fund. Not only did you tickle the fund, you sold every land title in the country. You sold every birth certificate in the country, and then you expect to get the trade on it. Now, as I said in West Australia, I said when you stole the state of West Australia and converted it into the state of West Australia devoid of the Commonwealth, is that bigger than the Great Train Robbery? Yep. But as I said to people who can't understand what I'm talking about, and I think I make it pretty simple, I'm a farmer, so you won't get much legal language here. What we've uncovered is the bank robbers running out the bank with the balaclavas on. And all the loot, they've jumped in the back of the getaway car and they've said, plant it. Now they have to get this getaway car around the corner into the garage of the United Nations. Is that fair? In there they'll be protected, they would have got away with the robbery. But the instant they said plant it, the car stalled. That's where we are now, folks. The car is stalled. Now you're going to walk over to the car and undo the back door and lift the balaclavas. Is Julia Gillard under one of those balaclavas? Yes. Is Kevin Rudd under one of the balaclavas? Yes. Is Abbott under one of the balaclavas?
Yes.
Because if they took the Crown out without the referendum, and when I was in the Sunshine Court the other day, because the Victorian Police are covering this, it's nice to be in Sunshine Court because you have a copper there and a magistrate there, so it should be happening pretty easy, but it doesn't. What are you here for, Mr. Shaw? A traffic ticket. But I filed 35 affidavits into that traffic ticket. Why? Because I'm stacking every process to catch the judges committing the offence. And I said to the magistrate, not in that hearing, but a different magistrate's hearing, I said, aren't you in breach of Section 34 now of the Crimes Act Commonwealth? He said, what's yes, Mr. Shaw? He knows full well what it says. It's in the document I filed. It says this, and please hear this very well. It says a judge or magistrate exercising federal jurisdiction with a personal interest, 2 years jail. What's the federal jurisdiction? The instant you're in a constitutional issue. What's the personal interest? You took the oath of allegiance out of the Legal Practice Act. That means you're not practising law with your oath here. Oh, yes, I am. I took an oath to the Queen. I said on the 5th of September 2000, you nullified that oath in the Victorian Parliament, and every lawyer and law firm in Victoria agreed to that. That's why the United Nations knows you ain't got a lawyer to look after you. Why? Because they've already committed it on the 5th of September 2000. Got it? which means you're saying, oh, how am I going to uncover this? Is that fair comment? Where you all walk around your paddocks, your tractors or whatever, you all know how to work the paddocks and the tractors and whatever, and one farmer has said to me, you winning or losing in them courts? I said, listen, Collar, if I lose, you lose, because what are you doing? I said, if I got in that truck that's fully loaded with hay and drove it up to Ballarat and sold the hay, the truck and whatever, I'll guarantee you got the coppers after me within the hour. But somebody got into your constitution and stole your land right underneath your feet, and at the moment you're only the tenant. Have we got the point here?
Not yet, Ron. We need to know
Is this getting to, there'll be questions after this, is this getting to the point, do you want to do that? All right.
What do we
I'll
do?
just, wait a minute, that'll come into questions. I'll give it 1 minute, I'll finish this, where it says this. Under banks, which is section 3AA of the Crimes Act of 1914, it says a constitutional corporation is a corporation that gets its grant of power from section 51, subsection 20 of the Commonwealth Constitution. If the Crown is removed without the referendum, can it get its grant of power? And on that, I'll pass it back to the
Thank you, Brian, for that. I think this is we've got a lot of questions out there. So Andrew's got a microphone. If you've got a question, raise your hand and Andrew will walk over with the mic. Please state who your question is directed to, whether it's Brian, Peter Andrula or Dr. Amy McGrath.
Is it on? Okay. It's just a comment, it's not a question. Just every time you say that it's bipartisan, we know from the CEC that the Fabians work the Labor side of politics, the Montpellier Society work the Liberal side of politics.
Okay, Brian, I'm a high school dropout, pretty simple kind of person. I'd just like to know if you could provide us with a simple step-by-step, step 1, this is what we do, step 2, this is what we do, step 3, so anyone can do it, and then we can also tell other people what they need to do.
Well, thank God for me that the Rockbank Committee has permitted me to be part of it. I'm not part of the committee, but they did ask me to come in and explain what's gone wrong. So I'm part of this structure now. After tonight, we are going to work extensively in the next 2 weeks to literally inform a lot of people in Werribee that if you do not block this next election, you will not be able to stop this truck. So the object of what we're about to do in the next 2 weeks, which is going to be put on a lot of websites, and to answer your question simply, it's what you call a round the table agreement of what we're going to do. So I can't exclusively say this is what to do. But in the next 2 weeks, and the girls have already put up that march.
Roger, sorry, could you please flick to the next slide?
It just seems like more information though. Like, surely there has to be something that people can physically do step by step to stop this. Or more information.
But that's exactly what we did and why they brought this forum to this particular venue, is to bring something from this forum tonight, but within the next week or two, to be clear on what you can do, but certainly attend that. That's absolutely critical.
Brian, do you want to... You want to say, right, this gentleman here next.
Can I also mention, sorry, just to finish off there, there's also, after the march on the same day in Werribee again at the RSL, there's going to be a presentation which hopefully will bring you some of the results of the roundtable discussions that Brian's speaking about. So hopefully we'll be able to give you a little bit more direction at that 15th of June.
That's a couple of weeks away, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
I sort of figure that there must be someone here who knows what we can physically do right now about besides just talk about it, you know?
In answer to your question, let me answer it a little bit better because John Laws in Sydney had a lot of talk about on this issue, particularly in relation to me. And one of my mates rang me from Sydney and he said, "You're all over the radio up here, but I've got the right to reply with John Laws in the morning." So when he introduced me, it was like I was the village idiot. Some idiot farmer from Werribee has got Julia Gillard convicted of treason. That's how he basically introduced me. And when I got on the radio, I said, "You're misleading the people before you even begin. First off, if I had got her convicted, she wouldn't be a Prime Minister, she would be in jail. Second off, is she was charged with misprision of treason because the West Australian Parliament took the Crown out without the referendum, which would have been a state referendum and a Commonwealth referendum. She was charged with that. To which John Laws said, "Oh, well, you can't interfere with the Constitution." And I said, and then he said, "But who charged her?" I said, "I did." And he said, "But you can't charge her, you're not even a copper." I said, "No, I'm a farmer." But I said, "Don't mislead your people. Because when you lay a criminal charge, anyone can lay it." Now, point one is this. If every one of you people gave a criminal charge, and we've got the capacity to do that, we can file it on your behalf. Because if you did it on your own, it'll be 2 weeks and it'll be back in your letterbox. But because I'm a vexatious litigant, to lay the criminal charge, I actually have to go in front of a Supreme Court judge to lay it. Well, all I need is an audience with it to say to the judge, "You better be telling them, because they're the ones filing it. I can lay it on your behalf."
So if you want to sign one of those forms, we have them available and you're welcome to sign them and we
Take
can...
those forms to other people and get them to sign it as well.
Correct.
Yep.
And a lot of
It's
people
just a one-page sheet with charges on it, and a very, very simple charge. Do you have that charge?
What question there? Yeah.
Now, the charge that we've formulated, is just
Hang on,
simply
there's
says, in its legal terms, that Julia Gillard did not disclose that she was facing a grand jury indictment. That is common law fraud. Simple as.
One thing that people can do is, because your council has no legitimate lawful authority under the 1988 referendum result, because they were denied their establishment and continuance, which means their very existence, they have no lawful right to levy rates because they're not a level of government, a bona fide level of government. So personally, and it's a pretty gutsy thing to do, what I've suggested to a lot of people that have emailed me is to write to council and tell them that you are going to withhold any imposts, rates, charges, etc.
It's already been
until
done.
such time as they can prove their authority to levy those charges,
Poor bloke.
right, and
We've already
imposts
done
and
it.
whatever. They don't have the authority, right?
Can I interrupt you there? Sorry to interrupt you, because that's the problem that Melbourne was getting. They all refused to pay the rates. Now they're finding themselves in the Sunshine Magistrates Court that then gives an order, and once that order's in position, they've got to then go to the Supreme Court to appeal it, and they've been told that's going to cost you 20 grand, which is automatically a 20 grand on top. So unless they understand, and the average person doesn't, how are you going to confront the law when the law's confronting you?
Yeah, so we need to give them step by step what to say when the person turns up at the door.
So by the time it gets to the Supreme Court,
No, you are that Supreme Court now. You have the ability to take this law into your own hands under Section 80 of the Criminal Constitution now.
can I speak now in relation to what we do? There is people doing things, and I'll make you aware of some things. Everyone knows that Gillard is a person of interest in the AWU scandal. I've contacted the detectives in relation to handling that matter. They have full knowledge, and they are trying to say it needs to be an issue to do with Australian Federal Police or Ombudsman. Well, I'm sorry, but you've already got an issue here because it's a state matter and a federal matter, and if she's a person of interest, you need to investigate it, and I'm doing my duty under the law, which says to report any concealment of treason or fraud to your local constable. So I put them on notice. Now, that's what I've done, and also the Herald Sun and Channel 9 and the media are aware of this. They've been given the court documents and affidavits, and they're sitting on it. Now, I'll give you a name. Chris Tinkler is the chief editor of the Herald Sun. I spoke to him 2 Fridays ago, and I told him in relation to what's going on. They've been handling this matter, doing all this information since the 7th, since September, and they're saying they're scared about presenting it because it involves all these high-ranking people, and they worry about litigation. So they're concealing it by the fact of not dealing it, which I'm giving information in relation to potential criminal charges. Yeah. So if people can do what they want, that's what I've done. And if it's only one voice in the wilderness, I'm saying other people do the same thing. Ring up the fraud squad, make an issue of it. She's already a person of interest, and if they're delaying the investigation until after the election, so they can deal with her, well, they're perverting course of justice, which is a crime. Plus, they are concealing it. They have knowledge. So we can either do, there's many things we can do. You can either make commissions of yourself with the fraud squad, and they're saying go to the Chief Commissioner, let them start an investigation. Well, she's already under investigation. This is further evidence that affects her character and a much serious charge. It's a life sentence. So anyway, that's what I've done, but if you work out what you want to do from that.
I've done it too.
So we'll take a question down this end.
Yeah. I didn't give my name.
Yes, the Royal Act,
I did, I read that.
saying that it would go to the Supreme Court and then it would go to the Supreme Court, right? Well, by the time it got to the Supreme Court, it would already be after the 16th of September, which everyone in Australia will vote no, and just say, you don't exist, so what's the problem?
And that's the point of being able to understand who prorogues the Parliament. I'll ask you that question. How is the Parliament prorogued and who prorogues it?
What's prorogued?
Well, you have a Commonwealth Parliament currently sitting, all the senators and House of Reps are up there, etc. But when Julia Gillard and Quentin Price agree, and only those 2 women agree, that we're going to prorogue, which means the Parliament is closed down, it sits silent. They'll do it on a Friday, for the election, for 42 days from the next Saturday.